It's pretty well accepted in the FNaF community that the Fazbear crew during 1983 to 1985 looked something like this, which are fixed versions of the Wizards, with the same shells and using an Endo O2 for structure. But what if I told you that they most likely never looked like that back in 83, and they most likely would have looked like the classics from FNAF 1? Don't believe me? How about I show you why? But before we dive in, I just want to give a disclaimer that I am not in no way hating on the people that make these amazing models. I'm just using them to illustrate what I mean. Anyways, I'm gonna split this video into two sections. The first section I'll talk about the endos, and the second section I will talk about the shells, and show you why they are most likely the classics. Now, let's talk about the endos, shall we? While we do see the Withers use Endo O2s for structure, I think, back in 83, they used a different Endo. What do I think that?
They even started retrofitting them with some of the newer technology.
As you heard, the Withers were implemented with newer technology, which is the Endo O2, and that would make sense, since the Endo O2s are what the toy robots use, which are newer versions of the old gang. So the old gang must have used different endos, because why would the new versions use the same endos as the old ones? They wouldn't. So the Wizards would have used a different endo before they were implemented with newer technology. So what endo did the Wizards use before? I think they used Endo O1s. So that would mean that the Endo O2 is just an upgraded version of the Endo O1. What I mean by that is, these two are the same endoskeletons, but with different modifications. Having the original four use the same endos, but with different modifications makes a lot of sense, since the souls possess the metal endoskeleton. If Fazbear Entertainment just changed the endoskeleton entirely, then the souls wouldn't possess the robots. That's why I think the two endos are the same, but of course, with different modifications. Or maybe the Withers used a very similar endo to the Endo O2, but the Endo O2 is still its own creation. Alright, so why am I so confident that the original four used Endo O1s? Simple, because of Fredbear. Fredbear uses an Endo O1, and uses the shell that is similar to classic Freddy. And the fact it's called Endo O1 implies that it came first. And yeah, that might be because the game it came from came first, but because we see Fredbear having an Endo O1, it looks like the reason became it came first. And I know you might be thinking that the Fredbear we see in UCN is not the real Fredbear, and can't use Endo O1 because he's a spring-lock suit and doesn't have 5 fingers. So my answer to that is, it doesn't matter. Every iteration of Fredbear always has similar appearance to classic Freddy. So regardless of inconsistencies, this Fredbear is the canon Fredbear design. So if Fredbear uses an Endo O1, Henry must have been the one who built it in the first place. That is supported by the fact that in FNAF 6, the Rockstars have a very similar endoskeleton to Endo O1. Some of you might be asking, then why are the Wizards' endos destroyed and broken if these weren't the original endos they used? Well, first, they were never completed, and second, they were used for parts, so they would have been torn apart. So in the end, regardless of what you think, the original four in 1983 used Endo O1s, not Endo O2s. Now let's go into the more confusing part of the video, if it wasn't more confusing enough. Since we now know which endos the Fast crew used, let's move on to the shells. Did the Fast crew use the shells that looked like the Unwithereds or the classics? Well, it's a little complicated. I think it's best if I explain the evidence for and against the two different shells. But before I continue, just know that I'm not including the minigame designs as evidence, because they're always inconsistent. So yeah, I won't use the minigames as evidence for or against. Let's start with the unweathered shells first. The evidence for is, the weathered shells look pretty old and damaged, but that could have been because they were torn apart for parts. And we also see a drawing of Unwithered Freddy in FNAF 6. And that's basically it. Now for the evidence against it. The Endo O1s don't really fit with the shells of the Withereds. You know what I mean? These two just don't fit together. Second, every time we see these designs, they're always in a damaged state. Not one time in the franchise we ever got a look or even a hint on how they would have looked like pre-withered, with the exception of the drawing in FNAF 6. Maybe Fazbear's are trying to sweep these designs of the characters under the rug because it's related to the murders. But the problem with that is, during the time of security breach, Fazbear's are playing with the rumors and are using it as a marketing strategy. They even have an arcade that used the Fredbear character, the same character that chomped a child in his birthday party in broad daylight. And if they're fine showing that, and the Fast Crew in their withered state in Help Wanted, why wouldn't they show anything about the fixed versions of them? Alright, what about the classics? Evidence 4 is they literally appear everywhere in the franchise and are always presented as the original gang. Fazbear Entertainment uses the classic Freddy in its logo. In Help Wanted, the fast coin that says Freddy Fazbear's Pizza since 1983 has a picture of classic Freddy. Glitchtrap stuffs us in classic Freddy in Pizza Party, and we see the other classics as well. In FNAF 2, we have the plushies that are based on the classics, and the end of night cutscenes, which probably shows the first time the characters came to life, and we see the gang are portrayed as the classics. And yeah, I know they are called dreams in the game files. It can still be dreams about the characters coming to life. Jeremy could have had those dreams as a side effect when working at Freddy's, which is filled with agony. Even if you don't believe me about Jeremy having dreams of Gabriel's memories, he still can have dreams about the classics, if they never existed yet. Other evidence 4 is Henry in the novel trilogy builds the classics in 1983, so they were the original gang. This could be the same for the games. And like we discussed, the gang used Endo 01s in 1983. Now for evidence against. You have Phone Guy saying the withers were too scary.
But they were just so ugly, you know?
But my answer to that is, it's a possibility that they redesigned the classics to look like the Unwithereds, but they still look too scary. Or another excuse could be, they found the kids' bodies inside and decided to stop upgrading them. Phone Guy even alludes to this when he's talking about why the Core 4 weren't used.
But they were just so ugly, you know? And the smell. So the company decided to just go in a whole new direction and make them super kid-friendly.
The smell. He knew about the bodies and tried to quickly continue the conversation. Fazbear's then wanted to make new robots, so they tore and dismantled the unfinished, redesigned old ones for parts. Lastly, there's also the FNAF 6 drawing, which is literally the only fucking thing that collides with this, and the only thing I don't have a proper answer for. The best I could come up with was, it was just a random drawing that Henry uses, or this drawing is one of the last remaining items from when the Core 4 were gonna look like this during 1987. I know it's not great answers, but that's the best I could have come up with. Literally everything about the classics being the original designs lines up. It's just that one drawing that throws a wrench into this whole ordeal. The designs of the classics have more evidence and make more sense, while the Unwithereds has less evidence, but has the drawing of Fixed Freddy as a clutch. Alright. So now that leaves us with two options of what the Fast Crew would have looked like during 1983 to 1985. The Fast Crew either look like the Unwithereds, but with Endo 01s instead of Endo 02s, or they're the classics. Personally for me, I think the classics make the most sense. But if you disagree, be sure to tell me why in the comments. Just for fun, let's make a short rough timeline of events for this video about the characters' designs. Henry, in 1983, built the Classic 4, with some design similarities to Fredbear, but after the missing children incident and Henry leaving the company, Fazbear's upgrades the Endo 01s of the Core 4 to Endo 02s for the new location, and put new shells on them. But even after the redesign, they still looked scary, and the fact they found the children's corpses inside of them made them decide to stop upgrading them and start to build new robots with facial recognition. So the shells and endos of the old robots were torn apart to be used for parts. They were now withered. Then after the events of FNAF 2 and the closure of the new and improved Freddy's, Fazbear's remove all of the modifications and upgrades from the Withered's Endo O2s, converting it back to Endo O1s, and putting their original shells back. So now they look like how Henry had built them back in '83 again. And the rest is history. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, like, subscribe, all that jazz. And yeah, see you on the flip side.